I am once again apologising for any background noise. The windows are open because it is warm. Welcome back to Dead Good Book Reviews. I'm Judith, and you're watching another episode of Overbooked, the series where I talk about every single book on my shelf because we need to decide if necromancy is the best thing for the economy. Today, we are talking about Sarah Glenn Marsh's Reign of the Fallen duology. This is the first book cover. This is the second book. Quick disclaimers before we start, very speedily. I bought both of these books myself. I own the first book on Kindle, I own the second book physically. Nobody's paying me to talk about books and all opinions are my own. I am going to keep this mostly spoiler free. We're going to have to talk about a little element of the plot that is a minor spoiler if you want to go in knowing absolutely nothing. But if you want to go in knowing absolutely nothing, click away now and don't watch this video. Come back when you've read it, we'll talk about it then. I will also link the story graph below if you want to find out the content warnings for this book, because there is some intense descriptions of grief and some substance abuse stuff going on, so if you want to avoid any of that, you can check that out for yourself. Reign of the Fallen is a YA fantasy duology. The first book came out in 2018 and it is called Reign of the Fallen. The second book followed, which is called Song of the Dead. I'm going to put it behind me though, so I'm not just holding something up for this entire time. Sarah Glenn Marsh, who, if you want pictures of dogs, so many dogs, she does Sighthound Rescue, follow her Twitter. It's just, dogs. She's also a YA author and primarily a picture book author at the moment. I'm not entirely sure of her publishing schedule, but there's been quite a lot of picture books and also a little bit of YA fantasy. I'm just going to include a little screenshot of my notes for this video. So yeah, plot summary. We have a world in which necromancy is the norm. This kingdom, necromancy is the norm. When you die, you get brought back, in most cases, which means that everything has sort of stagnated. The king is very against anything new happening. And we open with our main character, Odessa, and her partner, Evander. I'm a terrible person if I can't remember this. Evander, I was correct. Her and her partner Evander are making the trip to resurrect the king at the start of the book, but they discover a big shade, big bad things are happening, and this sort of unearths a conspiracy, but most importantly, Evander, I think it was in early on, I'm pretty sure this wouldn't be a spoiler, I will check the blurb, but Evander dies, and so the series is kind of an exploration of grief from the perspective of a necromancer, which is really interesting. It's also a romance, and we'll come on to that in a moment, but it's also kind of a look at what life would be like in a world where necromancy was the norm, and kind of the pros and cons of that approach. So my main pro, obviously, is that this is a bisexual necromancer book, and if you could really distill me down into a narrative, I think that would be what you would get. And I have a very personal connection to this series because this was kind of one of the books where early on, before I was like publicly out, I was out to myself, I wasn't out to the entire world. It was just one of those things where I was like, this is me in a book, and I can't necessarily tell everyone that that is the case. And I remember talking to my mum about the book and just being like, this is what this is, and her really fixating on it because she found that such a funny phrase, bisexual necromancers, and I was just sat there like, she doesn't know, which is just an interesting part of my history. She knows now, she's a very lovely lady, but at the time. So I have a lot of personal connection to this, but also I think that's just such a fun concept. And it sort of doesn't shy away from doing either thing. It's not like this is a very bisexual book that happens to contain necromancers, or this is a very necromancy book that just happens to contain bisexuals. It does both, and I like that. But I would say that primarily the driving focus of both books in this series is grief and recovery from grief, which sounds like a really heavy topic, and in some ways it is. There's a lot of difficult stuff in this series, but for the most part, I actually think that the look at grief is very honest, very open, it's very messy, which to me rings very true. We have these characters kind of exploring different coping mechanisms and coming to terms with things, especially in this context where, for the most part, grief isn't something you necessarily deal with that often because people can be brought back from the dead. There are reasons it won't work in this scenario, and I found that really interesting, and I hadn't read a lot of books that really dealt with messy grief in that way. We've read plenty of books where the main character will dip into substance abuse in the same way that this book does, but accepting all of the kind of chaos and the fact that you can fall in love and have a romance while that's going on, and that's confusing, and how do you deal with that? And sometimes life has to go on, and sometimes you still have to save the world, but you're still feeling rubbish, and all of that stuff. Fascinating. I also liked that they didn't just poof solve everything in book one like magic. It's not the thing where book one rounded off and then book two is a completely different narrative. They're very different books, and we'll come on to that in a moment, but there are a lot of things that are left at the end of book one that you just go, oh, how are they going to solve that? Because they haven't totally figured out if this romance is going anywhere, and they haven't totally figured out what the world is going to look like now. It's not totally set in stone, and I like that transition into book two, and I think it means it makes sense that book two is different enough because it's not just these are two books because I told the story I wanted to tell in book one, and then I gave up and went into book two. It's more nuanced than that. They are still very different, but there is more continuation between the two, and I liked that book two solves a lot of the problems I had with the ending of book one in terms of finding solutions to problems, showing me what the world would look like, and then what the problems with that would also be. However, in some ways, flip side of that, it is kind of the YA Duology book 2 problem of we need to take our characters somewhere else, but because book 1 was so insular, we haven't really got a sense of the world in the same way. There is more continuity. There are things brought up in book 1 that come back again in book 2, absolutely, but it does make it feel a little bit disconnected, and I would really recommend, therefore, reading them back to back. It's what I did this year for this reread, but when I originally read these, obviously I read one book one year, and the other book the next year, and it's not easy to match the two up if you haven't read them close together. So that would be my recommendation to solve that problem. I think the biggest thing that people might not enjoy about this book is the romance aspect, and this is like a minor spoiler. In fact, it's maybe a like middling spoiler, so I will put a skip if you want to skip to the end and you don't want to hear what the romance is. Evander dies, right? And the main romance of the next two books is between Odessa and Evander's sister. Now, I can see for some people that would be a bit ick and a bit no. And the thing is, I think the book recognises that, and I think that the reason that I wasn't kind of like, oh, no, this is, no, is because the book is like, this is weird, and we're both grieving for your brother, my partner, and how do we align this? And I think it helps that Odessa is set up as quite a messy character. So she just is living this kind of chaotic life, and the romance is explored across two books worth. If it were just in one book, I think I'd have got cross with it. But because it's two books of being messy and figuring it out and deciding if it's the right thing to do or not, right thing to do, is there a moral judgment here? I don't know. And I think that really works, but I can see why for some people it would be, oh, that's what's happening. No, thank you. Perfectly valid if the case, but for me, I think that because the book acknowledges the chaos of it all, and the mess, and the questions you might have about that kind of thing, it works for me personally. Comparisons, some other things you might want to read if you liked this, or if you like these books, you might also like this book. A.M. McLemore is an obvious choice because she writes queer YA fantasy. I think the most similar for me would probably be maybe Wild Beauty, maybe. This is much more high fantasy than anything A.M. McLemore writes, but if you want queer characters in fiction in YA fantasy, that's where I would go for that. Obviously something like Cemetery Boys has it's queer and also necromancy aspect, again, not fantasy to the same degree. Labyrinth Lost is another one that has bisexual characters. That's, I think, the third book in a series, so you might need to read the first two. Or is Labyrinth Lost the second one? Either way, you're probably going to need to read more books to get into that one, but has also kind of going to the world of the dead going on, which is always fun. And obviously, if you want necromancy just on its own, I always recommend Sabriel, Old Kingdom series. I'm going to do a read-through of all of them. It is going to be in 2023 though, because there's not time this year. There's just not. But then we will decide which ones of those I actually recommend. But I definitely recommend Sabriel. It's a great book. As I say, I have a very personal connection to this series. It's one that just has my heart. But I fully respect that there are some reasons these books might not be for everyone. I think that as a YA duology, it is a good example. And maybe I'm biased. Maybe it's that personal connection winning out. But I think compared to a lot of the YA duologies I've been reviewing lately, it just has a little bit extra. It just feels a bit more like book 1 and 2 were conceived together, rather than feeling like a book deal was got for book 1 and a second book, and then they wrote the second book. You know? I think that's everything I wanted to say on these, but if there was anything else, I'll put it in the description. Thank you so much for watching. Please comment below with other necromancy-based books. You know I'm always looking for them. Anything where you travel to the land of the dead, I'm pretty much here for it. Give it to me now. While you're down there commenting, if you haven't already, please do subscribe. It makes me feel loved and appreciated. Thank you so much. You can also follow me on social media. Come hang out on Discord where we have a wonderful time talking about books. Nothing makes me feel more loved and appreciated than my patrons over on Patreon who accept all of my chaos and mess. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. If you would like to join their number, that's linked below as well. Thank you so much for watching. That's all from me, and I will see you in the next one. It's gonna be some bloopers now. Welcome back to Dead Good Book Reviews. I'm Judith, and you're watching another bit. And we'll come on to that in a moment. And we'll come on to that in